Hi everyone, today we're covering chapter 58 from Guyton, which deals with cerebral cortex. The first half of this chapter talks about the known cortical functions, and the second half of the chapter deals with the thought processes, memory, analysis of sensory information, and so on. Now, cerebral cortex is the largest part of the brain and it's the most studied part of the brain. Ironically enough, it's the one that we're least certain about in regards to its functions. And the functions that we are certain about, they are as a result of the effects of damage. For example, if a certain part of the brain or cerebral cortex got damaged and a certain let's say movement got compromised, would associate that region with executing that certain movement, right? And the second method that we know that this region is associated with this function is because of stimulation using electrons, right? Stimulation of the cerebral cortex using electrodes. Now, when you talk about the physiologic anatomy, first of all, you should be knowing what cerebral hemispheres are. So the two halves of the brain, they're cerebral hemispheres, right? And cerebral cortex. What exactly is cerebral cortex? It's the outer part, so do not get confused. Cortex is the outer region, right here, the grayish part, that's the cerebral cortex. So I hope that you can make out now. And it has a lot of convolutions because of which this surface area gets increased drastically. So this is the cerebral cortex. Now you already know cortex is the outer region, and in brain I've made you memorize OG, which is outer is the gray matter. So in the outer part you have gray matter. And what exactly is gray matter? So gray matter consists of the unmyelinated axons, right? So unmyelinated axons, they give off a grayish appearance. And the other thing, what about myelinated axons? Since they're myelinated, the myelin sheath, they'll give off a whitish appearance. Now, gray matter consists of unmyelinated axons, and the other thing, it consists of the cell bodies. Cell bodies, because there is a bundle of cell bodies, it's also going to result in a grayish appearance. I hope that's clear. So this is the cortex, which is made up of gray matter, so cerebral cortex. Now, when you talk about the physiologic anatomy of the cerebral cortex, you need to know about its so first of all, it's the functional layer of the cerebrum. It forms a thin layer of neurons on its surface. The thickness is around 2 to 5 millimeter surface area, and you can notice that it has 80 billion neurons. And if you talk about layers, it has six distinct type of layers. Before moving to the layers, you need to know that these six distinct layers and the 80 billion neurons, what are those? What are the three major types of neurons? So GFP, you have granular, fusiform, and pyramidal. Granular, fusiform, and pyramidal. Granular, let's just get done with it quickly. It's also known as stellate neurons, and these are interneurons. They function as interneurons, and they're involved in intracortical processing. They're very short, so they basically remain within the cerebral cortex, and they help to associate one region with the other. So basically, they're predominantly found in the sensory as well as the association areas. And when you talk about granular neurons, they can release excitatory neurotransmitter. What's the prime example? Glutamate. And they can also release inhibitory neurotransmitter. The prime example is GABA. Do not forget that. GABA and glutamate. Glutamate excitatory and GABA is the inhibitory. So we're done with the granular stellate neurons. These are interneurons. They're involved in intracortical processing, and where are they predominantly found? In the sensory region as well as the association areas, because association areas will need the interneurons, right? Then pyramidal neurons and fusiform neurons, these both, they are basically output fibers, so they're going to take the information to other parts of the body, right? So pyramidal are the larger ones, the largest among the three, and they're most numerous, right? Pyramidal, and they're responsible for long distance connections, so they can give the information to spinal cord, subcortical structures, so basically output fibers. And then fusiform neurons, they contribute to cortical output fibers again, but they're less numerous than pyramidal. That's all you need to know for the fusiform neurons. Other than that, you should know that they have horizontal fibers as well as vertical fibers, and that's pretty much it. You don't need to know more detail about horizontal and vertical fibers for now, just know that. Now, when you talk about the six functional layers, very important, you need to know their names. First of all, you have molecular layer. Now, molecular layer is this is the surface of the brain, right? So when you talk about the surface level of brain, you'll find the molecular. So this is basically the outermost and innermost, like in the if this is the outermost, the cortex, and this is, let's just say, medulla, like in the middlemost, right? Just like I'm giving you an example. So layer one, the outermost, the surface layer, that's the molecular layer. Then you'll have the external granular. Then you'll have external pyramidal. Then you'll have internal granular. Then you have internal pyramidal. Then you have polymorphic or fusiform. So molecular layer, the outer one, is also known as plexiform, and the innermost is known as the polymorphic or fusiform, right? So these are inner and these are outer, external, right? And also one thing that you need to know about these layers is that layer 1, it consists of intracortical connections, right? And 2 and 3, short horizontal connections. Now basically these three, the first three, the outermost three, these are basically for connections which are responsible for intracortical connections. Basically they are within the cerebral cortex itself, but these are going to be longer neurons. And if you talk about 4, so it's going to receive what? It's going to receive the input. So all the sensory input is directly going to come into the 4. So this is the input area. And what's the output area? These two are output area. So let me just label this. This is in, so input, and these two are output, right? I hope that's clear now. So whenever we look at the layers, first of all, let's be clear. Layer number 4, I, it starts with I, right? So what happens in layer number 4? Input comes. So input lands here. What sort of input? Sensory input. So it terminates in layer 4. So done. Now what about output? Output goes from these two layers, the innermost. So you have inner pyramidal and polymorphic and fusiform. This is going to send the output. The fifth layer, this is going to send the input to the subcortical areas and spinal cord, basically the brainstem and the spinal cord. Whereas the layer 6, this is going to send the information to thalamus. So do not forget, layer 6, which is the innermost, is going to send the information to thalamus, and this is going to send to the subcortical and brainstem. Basically subcortical is brainstem and spinal cord, and this is going to receive input from sensory areas, and these three are for intracortical processing. That's it. These are the functional layers: molecular, external granular, external pyramidal, internal granular, internal pyramidal, and polymorphic. Right? Easy. I hope that's clear. Now moving on. Let's talk about vertical and horizontal fibers. I've already told you the two types of fibers, horizontal and vertical. Horizontal is going to link adjacent cortical areas. What about vertical? It's going to, since it's vertical, so it's going to uh, connect the cortex with subcortical regions, spinal cord, and other distant cortical areas, right? And another thing, this layered organization enables the cortex to integrate sensory inputs, generate motor outputs. So integrate sensory inputs, let's label. So fourth is for integrating the sensory inputs. What about generating? Okay, generating motor outputs. So fifth and sixth for generating motor outputs, and support intellectual functions. So intellectual functions will be by these three, such as learning and memory. I hope that's clear. So these are the layering. And in the layering, you may be wondering that why is it divided in right and left, right? Because you can see the right side is different and left is slightly different. So that also I'll tell you, but we'll cover this in the sensory aspect of it when we're studying the sensory chapters. Now, another very important thing is about the cortex and thalamus interdependence. We all know that cortex and thalamus, they're very much interdependent. And there's also something called as thalamocortical system. Thalamocortical system is basically a collective term for both the thalamus and cortex because they both depend on each other. If your cerebral cortex was functionally perfect but thalamus is not working, then there'll be a lot of issues with the cortex as well. If both of them are not working, there'll be a lot of issues, right? So in the book they're saying, actually let's just open the book lines and I'll tell you. This is the paragraph that we're focusing on. All the areas of the cerebral cortex have extensive to and fro efferent and afferent connections with deeper structures of the brain. So deeper structures of the brain like thalamus. It is important to emphasize the relation between cerebral cortex and thalamus. When the thalamus is damaged along with the cortex, the loss of cerebral function is far greater than when the cortex alone is damaged. If cortex alone is damaged, there won't be a lot of issues. There'll be issues obviously, but compared to thalamus and cerebral cortex as well, both of them together being damaged, there'll be a lot of issues because thalamic excitation of cortex is necessary for almost all cortical activity. So for all cortical activity, thalamic excitation is utmost important, right? Is of utmost importance. Now, figure 58 2, it shows what happens exactly. So you can see this part of the cerebral cortex, the visual cortex area, that gives information to the lateral geniculate body. This gives to pulvinar. This gives to, where's the medial geniculate body? This is medial geniculate body, right? So these three were done. Now you may be wondering, oh, what is this lateral medial geniculate? So when we're studying thalamus, so this is the lateral geniculate, this is the medial geniculate, right? So I hope that's clear. Lateral geniculate is for the vision, and the medial geniculate is for the auditory. And what is pulvinar? Where is pulvinar? if you can see this entire, let me just show you in the other diagram right here. You can see this is the pulvinar, right? So, oh, oops, wait a minute. Let me just, yeah, this is pulvinar. So you have basically medial, lateral, anterior, anterior, medial, lateral, and in lateral, the posterior aspect of it is pulvinar, right? And then I told you about the lateral and medial geniculate body. Lateral geniculate body is for the vision. Medial geniculate body is for the auditory impulses, right? So let's just see lateral geniculate body for the vision. Yes, lateral geniculate for vision. Then this is pulvinar, and now in the lateral, um, so anterior, medial, and lateral. So lateral, the posterior part was pulvinar, and then medial geniculate, that's for auditory, and this region is mainly concerned with auditory. So we are done with this. Then you have dorsalis medialis, ventralis lateralis, and ventralis posterolaterales. Actually, these are Latin names, right? So when you're studying thalamus, you'll be able to clearly distinguish between all of these. That what all do you have? You have this entire nucleus is dorsomedial nucleus, dorsomedial nucleus, right? So let's see what is the dorsomedial nucleus. Right here, dorsomedial. This entire prefrontal cortex is for dorsomedial, and these are from the lateral aspect, right? So that's it. You need to know about thalamus. So every specific area takes information to a certain part or certain region of thalamus. I hope that's clear. And then we have shows the areas of cerebral cortex that connect with specific parts of the thalamus. These connections act in two directions, both from the thalamus and to the cortex, and then from the cortex to the thalamus, essentially the same area of the thalamus. Furthermore, when the thalamic connections are cut, the functions of the corresponding cortical areas become almost entirely lost. So if the thalamic connections are cut, again, that corresponding region is not going to function as well. Therefore, the cortex operates in close association with thalamus and can almost be considered both anatomically and functionally a unit with thalamus. So they both are considered a unit. Thalamus and cortex. Do not forget. That's the reason I'm laying a lot of importance on this. So it's known as thalamocortical system. Now, almost all the pathways from sensory receptors and sensory organs to the cortex pass through the thalamus, with the principal exception of some sensory pathways of olfaction. So, other than olfaction, all the other sensory pathways, they're going to first go to the thalamus, and after the thalamus, they're going to go to the cerebral cortex. So, I hope that's clear. So, first they're going to go to the thalamus, and then they're going to go to the cerebral cortex, other than olfaction. So, that's one of the sensory pathways that doesn't go to the, what do you call it, thalamus. Now functional air, okay, this part we're going to cover in the next video.